So I guess just to introduce myself, because yeah, I guess we're not like super familiar with each other. Like my name's Aiden. My tag is Calvin. You know, some people call me that. I have been a TO for predominantly the Smash community, like mostly Super Smash Bros. Melee, but the other Smash games as well over time, since the end of 2013, and just I've run tournaments over the years and been involved with like the FGC like here and there, like whether it be like through just like being a part of like larger tournaments or like attending stuff, helping out, or probably most of my involvement came from when I worked at Smash GG. I worked with like the fighting game community or like fighting game tournaments a lot when I was over there, and now I work for Beyond the Summit, and I put on events at Beyond the Summit. I was originally hired to work mostly on Smash events, but run like a variety of like other esports events as well. So that's kind of like my background. I'm also like a competitor. Like I've competed in Melee for coming up on 7 years, and I also like love competing in other games in general. Melee is just the one that I'm the best at, I guess.
Well, that's awesome, man. I'm really happy to have you here. That's quite a background, man. That's quite amazing, and that's really dope. I'm glad you've been able to do a lot for the community. I've just been playing Super Smash Bros. Melee for the better part of 20 years now, I want to say.
Fuck yeah, since the beginning.
Yeah, and other than that, I've just been picking up fighting games here and there. I've competed mostly in Dragon Ball FighterZ since release, since it's come out.
Nice.
And recently I've been picking up Rivals of Aether, and I've been competing in that. And so that's just the main things that I do. And I try to keep like up with other fighting games like Street Fighter, of course, Tekken, and all that. But yeah, those are just the main things I have my hands dipped into. And I recently have helped out setting up the TCS tournament with Cloud 805. That was a all online through Parsec Dragon Ball FighterZ tournament, and I helped
through Parsec.
Yeah, and I helped do some of the bracketeering for that.
That's dope. That's awesome. Dragon Ball, especially the beginning, man. It was so exciting. I feel like they kind of stopped their own momentum, but everything was like so exciting. Like, and it feels like it's bouncing back now too, from what I've seen. Like the crossover between like so many different people from so many different like game backgrounds and then coming together to compete in one game was like so appealing.
Oh yeah, no, it's really incredible seeing like Smashers and Marvel players, Street Fighter players all playing the same game. It's truly incredible, and yeah, I definitely feel like they're shooting themselves in the foot lately with a lot of things they're doing. But the community is trying to keep the game afloat, and you got to give them props for it. You got to give them props for it, especially for like what Bum16, all of the comm guys have been doing. You got the Cloud 805 TSCS on the West Coast. But
yeah, it's an awesome scene. Like I've really enjoyed like just watching that game in passing. So.
And then most recently the Slippi GG tournament, didn't that start up recently?
Yeah. So we just started running that last weekend. I've been working on it for a while, and like last weekend was the kickoff. So like super happy to just like have that out in the public and just have it like actually happen now after just kind of head down working on it for so long. It's nice to see a final product.
And it came out quite successful. You guys got over, I want to say, like I saw a peak of like over 13K viewers. So you guys did a really tremendous job on that.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, a lot of my chat was like saying like it's not gonna get that many views, and I was like, you guys are doubting the Melee scene. This thing is gonna get views, and it got a lot of views. So you guys did a really good job on that, and I'm really excited to see the rest of it. But
yeah, 3 more weeks.
Indeed. With that being said, I want to get your thoughts on open brackets and how they can present problems to new players in the scene. Like, say, like they run into like pro players or just higher skill players. How do tournament organizers like account for that, and what are the problems that they can run into with that?
For sure. So I think with like the original tweet and like me replying, my first reply was like very like tongue-in-cheek. It was just supposed to be funny. I didn't even think like many would see it. Like I kind of agree with it because it's a very like ethereal, like goofy thing to say to something like, because the screenshot and like what the player is asking and saying is like inherently silly in a way. And I think the question of like what is fair and what isn't is kind of like, it kind of rides on like the subjectivity of like the player. And to be clear, like I don't think like brackets are like inherently unfair. So I do think, however, like the thing I was like kind of joking at, and then the thing I ended up like explaining more seriously later, was that I do think that there is a problem where newer players, when they encounter like the double elim environment in like really old, like not even super old games, but just games where the skill floor and the skill ceiling like continues to widen, it becomes difficult for new players to like get involved with live events and come to tournaments and like have a good time. Because I think like for anybody, losing is a hard thing. And I think for the people that like, there's a lot of like sentiment within the FGC and Smash. Like if we look at the whole thing, all the best players, like, and including myself, like people who kind of like wade through the beginning stages of their career and like take the beating, will say like get good, and that's like part of the experience, and that's kind of true, but it's like that unique and rare perspective from the people who fought through it, and like the majority of people attending tournaments will not have the same grit to get through being beat for potentially years, depending on when you get involved with that game. And the example I fall back to a lot is when I got into Melee, I was right at the beginning of like the boom of it growing at the end of 2013 and then through 2014. So when I was attending my first tournaments, I was terrible. I was so bad. And at my first big tournament, I still won a set. Like I didn't go 0-2, and it wasn't because I was good. It was just because there were so many new people coming into the community at the time. And also the skill ceiling, or rather like the skill of the average player who already played the game, wasn't that high yet. So the game was like weirdly accessible in the sense that every tournament had enough new people showing up that the average experience for like a low-level player was pretty good, because you had a considerable chance of winning, and winning feels good. And even if you went 0-2 in 1 week, you had a realistic chance of improving enough or just getting a better bracket like the following monthly to not go 0-2. So progress was like really, really easy to quantify. And but now when you show up to tournaments for Melee specifically, and this would like vary game to game depending on how long it's been around, but now when you show up to Melee tournaments, you can be kind of like a seasoned net play like veteran who's played for maybe like a year, you could be like pretty decent, like somebody who was capable of going with your skill, capable of going like 2-2 at a tournament years ago. But now when you show up to a local, the people left and like the skill ceiling, the average skill is so high that 2-2 ability from like 2013, 2014 is going to get you like 0-2 for a long period of time now. And it's because like we have this environment where most of the people showing up to tournaments still are kind of like battled hardened, like very good players. And you're kind of asking the bad players to show up over and over and over again, pay money to go 0-2, potentially drive like 20, 30, 40 minutes each way to get to that tournament. And it's just not a very good like dollar value, because you're pretty much guaranteed to go 0-2 every time, unless you're like pretty good. And that's kind of the issue that we're running into, I think, where this experience for newer players isn't very good at tournaments. And a common, like, I guess we can kind of like stop and like restructure this a bit. Sorry, I've kind of like just gone off.
But, no, it's all good. No, it's all good. No, I'm really enjoying listening to this, especially from like a unique perspective, because this is stuff like that I don't think about, you know what I mean? So it's definitely interesting to hear this.
Cool. Well, so I think one thing that came up a lot is people were like, yeah, something really unique and cool about the FGC is you can show up to the open bracket, like at a major, and play like Daigo in round 1. You can play Armada in round 1, or not Armada anymore, but just examples of like very good players, right? And that's part of the appeal as a new player, is like you get to compete with the top talent right away, potentially.
Yeah.
But I think the aspect of that we're ignoring is that is cool one time, maybe 2 times. But if you show up every week to your local and lose to Armada or Daigo every time after you pay $10, and you don't have any way to measure your improvement against that person because that person is so far beyond you, then it's not going to be fun to keep showing up anymore. And that's kind of what's happened, is like we don't have like in most games that age, the attendance declines over time. Even in games that we would say are doing like relatively well, like Street Fighter or Tekken. It's a little harder this year. Like we don't have as many. I think Tekken's in a weird spot where like it didn't really get to come into its like full bloom because of
Tekken got hit. Yeah, Tekken got hit dirty by 2020.
Exactly, and I think that stopped a lot of their momentum. But you can see like the nice thing about Smash GG was that I could see the data in tournament entry numbers across like all games, and everything like follows a pretty similar trend of like the attendance starts declining, and the players that stick with it are getting better and better and better, and it becomes increasingly difficult for new players to like enter that scene. And I think we have a situation where new players don't want to show up to events because they know they're going to get bodied. And it sounds stupid because like I think the reaction from people who stuck it out like us are like, well, getting bodied is like part of learning, it's part of the enjoyment of the experience, but no matter how much we say that type of framing is not going to be what successfully pulls people in. And I can say this by like, and you've probably had a similar experience of like asking people why they don't go to tournaments or why they didn't show up and enter bracket. And the answers are so similar. Like they're consistently something to do with, I don't think I'm good enough
anymore.
Yeah, or like it's too hard if someone who did go to tournaments for a while. And so I think that's like kind of the core of the issue, and why I had some frame of sympathy for the person in the screenshot on Scrub Quotes was that, to them it probably is not fair. And I think this is shown through other games too, like in tennis. Like I don't think tennis has to deal with other issues. Like you simply have a larger scale of a player base, like right, like it's an international sport. So there are other factors that play into this, of course, but there are no like big open major tournaments. You have to qualify for them all somehow, and you're not dumping new like juvenile tennis players against like top level professionals, because it's just not a very like cohesive like way to grow as a player, and it's not something that gets people to stick around. But when you give people the chance to play people at their own skill level, people that are slightly above their skill level and people that are slightly below, they will improve faster and they're more likely to stick around with the game. Because I think that's what was I going to tie this into? There's a really infamous Melee post. I don't know if you're familiar with Crunch, HBox's coach, who wasn't his coach at the time, but he made this post in New England Melee on Facebook that was called "Stay in Your Lane," and it was the idea of playing people within a certain bubble of skill around you, because that is the best way to practice and improve. Because when you play someone too far above you, you don't really learn anything. They're like competing at this level that is so far above you that it's really hard for you to even like stop and take anything away from the game.
And then it's also easy to discredit yourself by just going, oh, well, that's just Mango, or oh, that's just, a top player, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Like you kind of give your an excuse before the set even starts, right? It's like, I know I'm gonna lose, like because it's Leffen, he's just that good. But if you want people to like have that like sense of direction and like an idea of their own improvement, and give them like a path to like and a reason to stick around, you kind of need to give them this weird bubble of their own skill. And I came up in an era where that was just kind of accidentally provided because like a documentary happened to blow up and a bunch of people decided to start attending tournaments. Like I got that from my experience, and a bunch of people in the 2013 to 2015 era did, because like it was just coincidentally when a bunch of new people were showing up, and we had that like basic bubble of like new people and people close to our skill at every tournament. So yeah, I think that's like the core thing I wanted to get at, is like these as games like especially larger games, like as those communities age, you need to change the way tournaments work if you want to keep people around and keep people attending in-person events. Because if you don't, you eventually reach this issue where the core player base that's left attending those tournaments is at such a high level where it prevents new people from attending the tournaments. And this idea that we can just tell those people who aren't showing up to get good or to like stick it out and it's just the way it is, like we can say that and maintain some sort of like principle about these things, Or
But it's not
we
inviting the
can,
new players, yeah.
exactly. That doesn't change whether or not they're going to show up. It just like it makes you feel better as like an individual, right? It's like, yeah, I did this. It's kind of the thing I would compare it to is like when people are like, yeah, I paid off my student loans, so these kids should have to deal with their student loans too. You know, like I made it happen, why can't they? And obviously the gravity of those problems are vastly different, but that's like my comparison in that like just because like we climbed through a shittier era does not mean we can make it more inviting to newcomers in the future.
That's very true. I agree with mostly that. I thought we were gonna have a debate, but I agree with mostly what you said there. So I guess my main question would be how do you suppose that like tournament organizers would like change the way that tournaments are ran in order to help out newer players and like middle ground players like face off against other players of their skill level while still being able to have like high skill level and pro players attend those events? Like how do you think there'd be a good way to like make that mix happen?
Sure. So I think there are a few like models even within like the Smash and FGC you can kind of point to that provide like better basic experiences for players. I think when you I think one asterisk for starters. I do think some FGC communities are even at their peak a little too small to like implement a lot of these things. Like the reality is if like you have like 5 to 10 people showing up to a BlazBlue local, it's gonna be really hard to like layer a tournament based off of skill levels because like there's just not enough people who are even interested in showing up. And that's not to like flame those communities. It's like they have more upfront, like more concerning problems of like just introducing their game to a wider audience to begin with, rather than like maximizing the new player friendliness. Whereas like Smash and Street Fighter and Tekken, I think those games exist in a different world where like there is a base audience that is familiar with them and might be interested in going to tournaments if it was easy enough to attend them.
That's actually very true. No, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you, but I actually did a small Twitter poll and only got like 10 responses. But I asked like when you think FGC, what's the first game that comes to mind? And I had Tekken, Fighter Z, and I had Third Strike up there. And most people picked either Tekken or Fighter Z because Third Strike is such an old game now. No, like not a lot of new players have heard of it. And so that definitely stands for it's just like older games that just don't get that attention anymore because those tight-knit scenes have those niche issues.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And you know, for Third Strike, like no amount of bracket restructuring, unfortunately, for how good of a game it is going to get like a bunch of people to show up to Third Strike locals, right? Like there would have to be some different outside force that like influences attendance in that community, similar to how the documentary like had a huge influence on Smash at the time. So I think like when we think about these larger communities, like when we think about Tekken and Street Fighter and Smash and what we could do to make the game our events as inviting as possible to those newer players, I think copying a similar format to what the Smash 64 community uses is a great idea. So what they do is a format called Waterfall, where at majors there is an initial set of pools called placement pools. No matter how you perform in these placement pools, you will progress in the tournament. And what placement pools dictate is a division that you fall into from there. So if I top my pool, I go into Division 1. If I bottom my pool, I might be in Division 4, Division 3. And the way the rest of the tournament works is Division 4 pools play out after that, and people who win Division 4 pools climb into Division 3 pools, and so on. So technically, even if you bottom out in placement pools, you have the ability to progress as far through the tournament as you could possibly get. I could get dead last in my pool, fall into Division 4, and then if somehow by God's will I win every division thereafter, I can win the whole tournament. I can still win the entire thing with all the other pros in attendance. And I think a system like that is a very, very good. I think it's really solid. It has a few weaknesses, and I think they're pretty small and nitpicky.
The only main one I can see that would be a big one, especially for like major tournament organizers, for like say a Combo Breaker or like the late Evo, would be like just time. Like how would that work in a 3-day span? Cause that's just the only issue that I personally can see with that.
Yeah, scheduling is definitely a challenge. So like if you remove the idea of like resources from the equation, so just assume you have enough setups to like make whatever you want work. Because like there's a question of physical resources for sure. And then at multi-game tournaments, like there's this idea of like, well, if you have this format for more than one game, like even if you have it for one, like scheduling around the other events becomes increasingly difficult.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I think at most like 2 or 3 day majors, like the amount of time is not necessarily the problem, but the way you would layer the event among the other events at the tournament is the concern. That's one of the reasons why I didn't end up using it at the major that I've run. And that's so the biggest tournament that I run is called Don't Park on the Grass in Seattle. And
I've actually attended that one.
Oh, seriously? That's great. Yeah, so that's one of my proudest projects for sure. And what we did at the last Don't Park was we really wanted to address this problem of people showing up to majors, paying a lot of money, and then only getting to play like 2 or 3 sets. Like it's pretty lame to like show up to a tournament, not do so hot. Maybe you just aren't on your A game at your pool time, and then you're just out for the weekend. And then you don't have a lot else to do but like play casuals or play friendlies, right? And we came up with this concept. I was always a really big fan at Smash GG of this thing called the ladder matchmaking system, where for those who aren't familiar, you basically provide, through a Smash GG page, you provide a matchmaking service similar to like what an online game would have, where you queue up on your phone. Like I would go on the Smash GG page, queue for the ladder like with a button push, and then it would give you an opponent, and then you would go play that opponent in the ladder. And essentially, you're taking online matchmaking to an in-person experience. And it had its like little technical issues here and there, but it was a great way to get in a lot of matches because you could just queue as much as you want as long as the ladder was open. So what we did on for Don't Park was we had a normal tournament with pools and waves. And the best people and like winners and losers of each pool qualified for the top 128 bracket on Sunday. But we ran the ladder for 12 hours on Saturday, and you could play as much Melee as you wanted on the ladder during that time. And then the top 16 people from ladder who hadn't already made it into bracket through pools got another chance in the final bracket the next day. So it was a chance, like if you were willing to grind, like you depending on your win percentage, like you needed to play for at least 2 hours. But you could basically, by winning and by playing a lot, you could earn your spot back in bracket the next day. And I think we had like a couple thousand matches played. Like it was a lot, and they all technically contributed to the ending conclusion of the tournament, because someone competing in that ladder could still win the whole event if they performed well enough. And the bonus of this feature was that there's nothing to like schedule around, because it's like free form whenever the person wanted to queue up, and they could play as much as they wanted to. You could give up, you could take breaks, and it didn't require anything from players, and only let the people who cared enough to play more, which was like most people, like probably 50% of the participants, to play more if they wanted to. And that kind of worked around a problem of what the waterfall format has, where it advances everybody no matter what, even if they don't necessarily want to play anymore. And it also presents some scheduling challenges that are really difficult to navigate. So we decided to do that format because of the advantages that it offered us and kind of the dollar value it gave to competitors at our tournament. And as far as I know, is like the first time it's ever been done. Like I couldn't find any other instance of that format being used. And to this day, I don't think a major has used it yet again. And I think it went fantastically. Like the feedback was all positive. It had next to no like negative impact. Like we had very few complaints. And I think that format is really, really good, especially in large tournament settings. It has some issues. It wouldn't work as well at like locals and things. But basically at majors, like that format is fantastic. And like people can just use simple things like that.
Especially, yeah, when you have that wide player base, it definitely gives them more of a chance to come back. That's definitely a really interesting and creative solution. I really got to give you props for that, because like you said, yeah, no other TO has actually come close to figuring out something like that. So that's a really interesting solution, and I really hope that this gets traction where more TOs will actually consider using a system like that, because that could definitely solve a lot more problems, especially multi-game majors. or like you said, there's just not enough time to schedule over games. Just have them lap over, especially when you have a stream running, or you can only have like 1 or 2 streams running. That's a great way to have like lower to mid-level players still have the time in tournament without having to worry about without TOs having to worry about like streams and like having those big hype matches happen on stream.
I think like as far as FGC specific tournaments go, I think like because people enter so many games, like allowing the players to essentially pick what game they want to prioritize after they're out of all their pools, that brings a whole level of like convenience to using that format. And then also of the times like I've run ladder tournaments at FGC events, so I think like a Red Bull Street Fighter event and at Combo Breaker for Tekken and Marvel and some other games. And FGC players, like all the feedback for ladders, even when they didn't tie back into the main competition, was really, really positive. And I think ladders are just like an underdeveloped and underused feature, within Smash and the FGC, but more so the FGC than Smash. Just because like a couple Smash TOs made it mainstream by like trying it out at locals and stuff. But just using like ladders in general as a side event, even if you can't tie back into the main event, is like so welcome to all players, because everybody wants to keep like competing when they go to an event. Like if you pay money to sign up for bracket, like you care about competing in some way, and then you get to play as much as you want to after. And if you only care about getting back or like practicing Tekken, even though you entered Street Fighter and Dragon Ball, then you only have to play in the Tekken ladder afterwards. So I think it would be a great thing to see pop up more. I do think one thing that I've been discussing more recently, and it's come up a few times over the years, is I've had like a conversation with the Hado about this, and like some of like a close like Smash TO friends. But I think the ideal format is similar to what I was describing with the waterfall format, where you play your placement pools and stuff, but remove the placement pools from the equation, and your ranked performances outside of the major contribute to some sort of evaluation or seed or rank prior to the event. So like in the world of Melee, now that we have this amazing rollback netcode, and there will be a ranked mode out for it in the near future, the idea would be that you could compete at locals and compete on ranked net play, and that develops your rank like you would have in a traditional online game, like being gold, platinum, something like that. And then your rank and your performance leading up to a major would contribute to like the stage of the tournament you get to compete and start in.
And that could like tie into like Smash GG. Like if you had like an account in Smash GG, like the tournaments that you participate in place in would contribute to your rank, so then TOs would be able to place you properly. I see.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's like the end goal. And for Tekken, I think in Japanese arcades, you can get like for Tekken or Street Fighter, you can get like a fighter card or something, so that like when you scan the card on the arcade machine and you go play people, it actually adjusts like your score and your rank within the arcades and within playing online, something like that.
Yeah, they have score tracker cards. They like keep your rank and your score tracked on a card.
Yeah, and that system, basically taking that system to like some sort of like national or like rather like global level for the scene, and applying that to the biggest games, so that you're like grinding away from the tournament means something when you show up, and you're delivered opponents who are closer to your skill, and then it's easier to like measure your performance at that event. Someone like coincidentally, it was crazy that this came up on the same day, but a Melee content creator released a video the same day I was on that thread, and he made a video about why ranked would be so important for Melee. And it's basically all about how the nice thing about ranks are that you have an ability to follow your progress somehow. And when you go to tournaments, the number of people that go 0-2 and 1-2 are such a large pool of people that obviously there are distinctions within those people of who is good and who's better among just that group of people that went 0-2, or just among that group of people who went 1-2. So by implementing a rank system that carries over to tournaments in large games like Tekken, Street Fighter, and Smash, I think it would infinitely make the like player experience and like the reward of sticking around as a player better, because all of a sudden you have like this concrete goal of, I can show up to my local, I can show up to this major, and I'm trying to become a gold player, or I'm trying to become a silver player, instead of like this more ethereal thing of like, I hope my bracket luck is good enough to get out of pools this year, or I hope I can make like top 32, which like we all know as like veterans of a scene that like placement doesn't necessarily correlate with like how good you are. Like weird and wonky things can happen in brackets that don't really represent your actual skill.
Yeah, I can definitely speak firsthand to that. That is true. High placements does not equal skill.
Yeah, exactly. So I think by implementing outside systems like that, we could, the biggest games could drastically change their scene and make them way more inviting to those new players. And like maybe that dude in the scrub quotes screenshot, right, would be more incentivized to like sign up, because ultimately, like regardless of like how kind of like dumb, what he said was, because I think like it was not a very well thought out thing for him to just say like, oh, this is just unfair. I do think a lot of people who don't show up to tournaments, which is most people in a scene, if you think about it in a larger sense, they all have a similar thought process, which is like, I don't want to go waste my money and get absolutely destroyed by people who have played for 5 years. And I think like that problem, like if we fix that within the Smash and FGC, like 1v1 games and like are so easy to spectate, so easy to get into, so easy to like compete in. Like it's so bare bones compared to like watching a more complex esport like League or like Valorant or Counter-Strike. Like there's so many things to track there, and like so many teams and so many components that go into it. But the beauty of fighting games is that there's a health bar, and it's 1v1, and the goal is very simple. And I think we have a very attractive community if we make it accessible to people.
And I think it's very interesting also that you'd bring up, say, like League of Legends, because how some of their, well, not like their pro level, like Worlds doesn't work this way, but like how some of their smaller majors works is players that are placing exceptionally well in their ranked online mode, like if they can form a team, will then be invited to these majors to then try out for spots at then their bigger events. And so I think that other communities in like that sense are trying something similar that the FGC could potentially look into and adopt, where like they have like qualifiers or like just things like that,
Absolutely, man. Because like if you think about like just like what you were saying with League, right? League is the largest esport in the world. Like absolutely, it definitely has the most like developed space, like the most sustainable esports scene as well. And a lot of smart people work at Riot and developed these things over time, right? And the same goes for like traditional sports, like tennis, or like competitive games that have been around for a long time, like chess. Is these templates are they are out there and they exist, and obviously our games are different from them, and there will be small discrepancies that we have to account for. Not everything is going to carry over 1-to-1, but we have like information accessible to us to like model our own scenes after, and I think in the long run, like I think what some people are worried about is like there's this occasional idea that you're compromising principles or like the culture of the scene in order to grow and become an esport, and that's not necessarily what people want, and that's fair. I think that's totally a fair concern, because part of the beauty of the FGC is like the culture of it all. But I think like making tournaments more inviting to players is like not becoming corporate,
I would also counter that point by saying that like having what you would say like with like a global rank system, where I say go into a tournament, oh, I want to become like a gold player, or I'm just trying to become this, is it gives players a clear goal, which is something that I think tournaments lack when they become like really big, and you have like pro players to the point where oh, I know I'm gonna get roasted here, I'm just going to play in the tournament and I'm gonna go play friendlies for the rest of the thing. So like having that clear goal to work towards gives players more of a reason to engage, gives them more of a reason to come back, makes them want to go in the first place. And so I just that's a counterpoint I would give to like it's like the whole becoming corporate, is it gives players something to work for. And that's something that, especially in the FGC, players thrive on. Like, say, like, someone, like, gets beat up and they encounter this really intense mix, they'll go into training mode and they'll try to figure out that mix and how to beat it. Like, fighting game players love that challenge, and they love having that tangible goal. And I forgot who said it, but there's this really famous philosopher. It was brought up in a Core gaming video. I wanted to quote it, but he said, "Without a tangible goal, humans will not work towards anything." And so, just having that tangible goal will definitely bring more players to, say, locals, and increase that player pool to where locals don't have that problem of, oh, well, there's only 10 players, so how do I see this? Well, now we have like 20 or 30 players that are trying to make bronze, and we have 10 players that are trying to make gold. And, we got to figure this all out now. And so it opens up more opportunities for even smaller scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree with all of that. And it's cool you shouted out Corey, because I think we all love his videos, right? And I think he attacks like a lot of these, a lot of topics like this one, or like associated topics that cover a lot of things that are deeply tied into this. And people like him like show like there's why we do the things we do already, and how much further we have to go, and like what we can push for. I think like I love videos like his, because he like breaks down concepts like so concretely and so clearly, and like makes you understand like why things like need to change, or like why they are the way they are. Like his videos are like so eloquent and beautiful, like more so than whatever I could do.
Oh yeah, and especially the video on the need for community. That's one of his least watched videos. That was one of the videos he felt need to be the most made. And I agree with that sentiment, because it's really important to get new players into a scene if you want a scene to sustain, and having goals and stuff that new players can like tangibly attach themselves to, aside from just being like, oh, I'm gonna meet this pro player and then lose over and over, is definitely good. And yeah. And I think it's also something that game developers need to look into as well, in like when it comes to like things like implementing like a global ranking system, would be improving like how online play works. Because like, for example, like games like Tekken are really not doing too well because of their online in general, whereas Melee got this tremendous rollback that one guy did, and shout outs to Fizzy and his amazing work with rollback, and the folks at Slippi GG, and everyone that's been doing the Slippi Championship League. But that's happening now because of good netcode. And like the Dragon Ball World Tour thing that's going on, they're doing a big international tournament, and that's happening because of at least serviceable netcode. The community will tell you the netcode's not good, but it's at least serviceable netcode. And it's things that you don't see in like the Street Fighter V community or like the Tekken community. And so like if more game developers take notice of good netcode rolling into tournament numbers, which can roll into more players picking up their games, then that will definitely help things out. So it's definitely not just on TOs and the players, it's also on game developers as well, to improve their games, not only for themselves and to increase players playing the games, but for the communities as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there's I can only imagine what goes on like inside the doors of a game developer, right? I'm sure there's a lot of conversations, but I think like from what we can see, a lot of fighting games are released with short-term costs and sales in mind, and not necessarily thinking about the advantage that would bring to their like franchise by investing a bunch up front into something like netcode, and thinking about how that benefits the scene in their game like 5 years from then or 10 years from then, right? It's a bet, and it's like a less concrete thing to take a chance on, especially when you could just kind of go a safer route. But I think you're 100% right. Is like eventually the game developers need to like come around to it. I think like
especially
Smash.
When you have
Sorry,
but especially when you have games like Skullgirls and like Killer Instinct that are quite old games that still have active players and still see tournaments. Maybe not Skullgirls as much, but like Killer Instinct still sees massive tournament entry and still sees frequent online play. And like for example, like Mortal Kombat also sees a lot of tournaments, sees a lot of frequent online play, but that's also a newer game. But just like netcode has kind of been a solved issue. And at this point, I feel like developers should really look at the success of other games that have succeeded so long that it's no longer really a bet as much as just like it's a solved problem that they just need to make a new engine for. Because that's the main issue that I hear from a lot of people that I hear like when they're developing indie games, is like, well, if you account for it in mind when you're creating the engine, but then when you look at like say Street Fighter and like all the different versions that they're putting out, it's just versions of the same engine. So like implementing a whole new netcode system would be to implement a whole new engine into their game that they don't really want to redo. And so when they're doing
Yeah.
that, so it's something like when they make like a Street Fighter 6 or when they make like a Tekken 8, like they have to account for these things instead of just porting over the same engine. So it's just it's on devs to not be scared to take a risk that isn't there anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big upfront cost and something they need to account for pretty early on. But I hope more companies start doing it. It's kind of funny. I expect like more traditional fighting games will be the. I would expect more of the traditional fighting games to like start solving that problem first because I think the unfortunate spot with like Smash is that Smash is like Ultimate, for example. Netcode is like egregious. People complain about it all the time. But there's not really a real incentive to fix it, because it's Smash and it's like such a gigantic IP, and the casual player base like outweighs the competitive player base by such a gigantic scale that like you don't really need to fix things that the competitive community wants for the game to like remain big, right?
I
Like
totally agree.
yeah, because like so many people play Smash that like don't know anything about the competitive scene, but the baseline experience for a Tekken player who's just buying the game to play it casually is the same fundamental game that the competitive player is playing, right? So for the base player base in fighting games, netcode has to be so much more important to like sales and whether or not people enjoy it, because that's why people buy fighting games, is to play the 1v1 like fighting style, right? Whereas like with Ultimate, it's like they could take online out of the game and people would still play 4-person item free-for-alls at their college,
Yeah.
I think that's the unfortunate thing for Smash is I really don't feel like Nintendo necessarily has any like long-term incentive to fix it, but for Tekken, that has such a big impact on every single person who decides to buy Tekken.
That's very true, and I still like to hold faith with Nintendo when I see posts like them saying like, Sakurai says please use an Ethernet cable.
Yeah.
Like they like I feel like the community, like the competitive community, I'm forgetting how to talk for a second. The competitive community is so vocal in Smash that they can kind of drown out the casuals to the point where
Yeah.
Nintendo is forced to notice them. For better or for worse, but I hope that they can at least see it for better and maybe at least think about it and maybe see how it could improve their game. Although I do agree with you that they ultimately have no reason to like fix the netcode in their game, just like they have no reason to like port over like the Smash Bros Melee.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I've heard a lot of people discuss like whether or not they would want to like whether or not they should port over like a Super Smash Bros. Melee. Like there's no reason. They're Slippi. Why would they do that?
Yeah.
They're just competing with
Yeah.
themselves at this point. Like,
I don't think they ever will. And I honestly I think that that's a larger conversation, but I do think the Smash community in a way is like better off being independent anyway. And better netcode for Ultimate would be game changing, but that would probably be the one change that we're not better off without, honestly. But as far as like everything else, I think like the grassroots organization for the scene is like something that helps it otherwise, and maybe one day they'll come around to fixing the netcode anyway.
and it's definitely part of the appeal for a lot of competitive Smash. I know that a lot of my friends recently have been getting more into competitive Smash in like 2015, 2016 as more of just like a stick it to the man. I'm tired of Namco effing me over. I'm gonna go play this where all the people are actually nice to me. You know what I mean? Like Smash is just known for being like for the homies from the homies. So it's definitely unique in that aspect, and I'm glad that it's like that, and I hope that it stays that way with just like helpful pushes from Nintendo to make things better. You know what I mean? Like if we could rally around a game that functions, I think that's the key that would really just help bring it all together.
Yeah, I think the obvious comparison would be like Valve with Dota and Counter-Strike. I think of it for, of course those communities have more complaints. Like there will always be something more to complain about. But for the most part, what I like about Valve's relationships with those communities is that they've kind of provided the tools in the game for people outside of their company to take the wheel on the esports aspect. And I think that would be a perfect situation where if Nintendo can just kind of, put up the in-game resources for us to take the wheel thereafter, I think that's perfect,
Exactly. Well, it is 6 o'clock. I know you had to leave soon. Is there anything else you wanted to add to this topic? Because, I mean, I didn't have anything else I wanted to add. I thought we were going to have an argument, but I actually wound up agreeing with almost everything you said, so...
Yeah, man. I think that was kind of what happened on the thread, to be honest, is like everybody I talked to, like everybody who got deep enough with me realized that there was just a misunderstanding of like what I was trying to say at the beginning. And because I think like it's super, super easy to misinterpret like what I said at the beginning, because it was just like it didn't have any information.
Oh, yeah, especially when you only have like 140 characters to do it, yeah.
I think Twitter is so bad for discussions because there's just a cap and you cannot fully explain like any idea like in its full capacity. So
Oh, yeah, no, but I mean that's why I want to have this discussion here, and I really appreciate you coming on and having this talk with me on stream. I really appreciate it. I think if like we as a community can have more discussions instead of just like rants on Twitter, that we can actually build something that the community can talk about. And I just think having more discussions within the scene is just a good thing. So thank you very much, man, for having this conversation with me. I really appreciate it.
100%, man. I really appreciate you reaching out and like agreeing to do this, because I think most people that I would offer this discussion to like wouldn't take me up on it. And I thought that was super cool of you, man. And I love talking about this shit. And this is it's one of the things like community and like community growth and like sustainability is like one of the things I care about the most. So it's like just nice to sit down and talk about it with somebody.
Same, man. Exactly. Well, I'm gonna let you go. You have a fantastic evening. Thank you again for talking with me. It was really amazing. If you have any socials or anything you want to shout out, now would be the time, man. I know you work for Smash GG. Is there anything else you want to shout out?
Not much else. If you want to follow me on Twitter, my Twitter is Aiden Calvin, no space, and that's about it. I thank you again for having me on. Really appreciate it, and you have a good rest of your night as well.
Thank you very much, man. Well, you have a great night, man. Peace.
Cool. Peace.
That went so well. Like, I honestly thought that I was going to disagree with him. And have a great day. But yeah, dude, no, I really thought I was going to disagree with him, but it turns out we agreed. And that was super cool. That was amazing. So, yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. And yeah, like, comment, subscribe, I guess. But yeah, we're gonna hopefully have more discussions like this in the future, where we just talk with people that maybe not disagree with that maybe just disagree with us on Twitter. Maybe we can have conversations and open up a dialogue. I think if at least I can not rant on Twitter as much with people and actually have actual conversations, then it will help at least me better myself, and maybe it will help the community as a whole have more actual conversations and actually talk with each other and talk things out. So yeah, thank you all so much for tuning in, and I will see y'all next time. Much love. Peace. Let's fucking go! Let's not fucking... No! No! Yeah, son. Yeah, son. Yeah. I don't blame him. Yeah, son.